Thank you. I'm excited to introduce Allison Costo. Allison is a county extension agent in Broadwater County in central West Montana. She has been with Extension for 14 years, 8 of which she has been there in Broadwater County. So excited to have Allison this morning, and I will turn it over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Katie. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me this morning. As Katie said, my name is Allison Costo. I'm the extension agent in Broadwater County. I've been here for a while and had various experiences in extension even before coming to Broadwater County. And I sometimes joke with people that an extension agent is a professional meeting goer. I feel like I could probably spend every night of the week in a meeting and then fill my days with them too if I allowed myself to do that. And while that doesn't make me a professional in meeting facilitation, it does give me a really good insight on some of maybe the good and the bad and the ugly of meetings. And so today I was asked to share some meeting facilitation tools. And this is probably one of the funner things that I sometimes get the opportunity to do is utilize these tools in different settings in the community in the programs that I work with. So I've been participating in these as well. And so the last 2 weeks were wonderful. And I'm hoping I can share some insight with you. And all the other ones started with a little bit of a chat discussion question. And so I'm going to do that today as well. And so in the chat box, I want you to think about the most challenging meeting that you've ever had to facilitate and describe that experience in 3 words or less. So what comes to mind when you think of the most challenging meeting that you've facilitated? Put that in the chat box. No one talks. Yes. Isn't that frustrating? Tension and anger. Uncooperative, off topic. Railroading, gets off point. We'll talk over each other. Apathy. Brutal, contentious, mean, yikes. Yikes, I can relate to all of that. No leadership, technical issues. Oh yes, it's frustrating. We were just talking about that. Tense, volatile, suspicious, stressful, unproductive. Yes, I can relate to all of these. Positive outcome. I was waiting for a positive one in there because just because it's the most challenging doesn't necessarily mean that it's gone bad, right? Most challenging sometimes can end up being something very positive. So thank you, Colleen, for sharing that too. While I don't want to necessarily, or I'm not going to necessarily solve all of your facilitation challenges today, my hope is that I'm going to give you some ideas or tools so that when you have a challenging meeting that you're prepared to facilitate, is that you have some tools and techniques that you can go into that meeting with and be prepared with to hopefully have a greater chance of a positive outcome, because that's ultimately our goal, correct? So as you're starting to think about those challenging meetings, or maybe it doesn't even have to be a challenging meeting, it can be a routine meeting. One of the first important things to do is come to that meeting and set the groundwork for a successful meeting. And there's a couple things that you can kind of do ahead of time or do at the beginning of the meeting to set that groundwork. And I'll give you a couple different examples of some facilitation tools. The first one being to establish group norms. And I've seen this called a working agreement or a group agreement. There's several different terminology for this, but basically this is those positive behaviors necessary for your group to be effective. And it's a set of behaviors or norms that your group agrees on to determine how you're going to work together. Now, ideally, it should be something that the group discusses and comes up with together. I'm sharing with you on the screen there a real life example from a class that I work with. And it looks kind of rough. And I strategically shared that to you because this group was really fantastic about having some really great discussion about what these behaviors mean, what some of these words mean, what some of them, or maybe what they don't mean. And so it was a really great discussion and the group really took this seriously. And then once the group kind of came up with what they wanted it to be and what they wanted it to look like, then I made it a little more pretty to give to them at future meetings. Ideally, a working agreement or a group norm should be very simple, something that's very easy to understand. It should be direct, and then it also should be enforceable. And what I mean by that is that the group needs to hold each other accountable to follow the agreements within this group norm. It's also up to the facilitator to kind of help direct the group as needed throughout that meeting. What I do is once the group is kind of decided on this is then I make a copy of it and I'll either post it at every meeting or hand them out something so that they have this to reflect on. And if there's a series of meetings, I also give them the opportunity to adjust it if they need to change it. However, I find that most of the time, once they've kind of come to that agreement, they don't tend to make, and they spend that time discussing it, they don't tend to change it a lot. The other thing that's really important is that the whole group agrees on it. And so I usually ask for some sort of either verbal or visual sign from all my participants in my group saying that they agree with it, whether it's a thumbs up or a verbal yes or something like that. And so this can be a very effective tool, especially if maybe there's going to be some contention in the meeting, so that it kind of sets that groundwork again for how the meeting and the group will operate together. The next tool to share with you is agendas. And I know some of you are thinking, this is probably pretty cliche, Allison. Everyone does agendas. And I will tell you that's not true. Not everyone does agendas. And there's a lot of value to agendas for lots of different reasons. One, it just kind of lets people in the meeting, in the group, know what to expect and the topics for discussion. It also helps whoever's running the meeting, it's the facilitator, president, chairman, know that order of business. Because I can almost guarantee you, if I don't have an agenda for my meeting, I'm going to forget something. And then it's an email or a phone call or a special meeting to help figure out what it is that we forgot and then do our business on that particular item. And sometimes if people kind of roll their eyes when I hand them agenda, I'll even tell them like, it's not for you, it's for me. Because if I don't give you this, we're going to forget something. You can take notes on it. You can do what you want with it. There's 3 different real life examples here on the screen for you. And I'm showing them to you because there's lots of different ways to do agendas. There's not necessarily a right or wrong. And I would say unless you're doing some sort of like formal public meeting, and then there are some requirements for agendas. But the one on the left is a really informal agenda where just kind of a list of different topics of discussion on that list. The middle example is an actual public posted agenda for our county commissioners. And so it does have a little extra information up there at the top that's required on public agendas. Something that's unique about this agenda as well is that it's organized by time that you can see there. And so each agenda topic has a time assigned to it. The one on the right is more of a traditionally organized meeting around Robert's Rules of Order. So reports, old business, new business, etc. And so that's kind of maybe a traditional way to do an agenda, often used in 4-H as in this example, but it's just one way to do the agenda. So after you set the groundwork, the next thing is to think about that meat of the meeting. So what's on the agenda and why are you meeting? And the very first series in this series of presentations for the To Go series was on why do we do meetings? And Tara did a great job discussing that. And even though there are lots and lots of reasons why we do meetings, I would kind of maybe group them together into 2 different categories. The first one being like a kind of a brainstorming or a capturing of ideas coming together to discuss a topic. And then the second being some sort of decision making. And so that's kind of how I have broken down my facilitation tools. The first one being that brainstorming meeting or the capturing of ideas. And someone in the chat box mentioned the no one talks. So how many times have you been to one of these meetings and you know you're all there to discuss the same thing, and the chairman says, okay, so now everyone share your ideas. And people just sit there and they look at you or look at each other and no one says anything. And so the idea behind some of these brainstorming tools is to make sure that everyone in that group or that meeting is equally participating and has the opportunity to share their thoughts and ideas. So the first tool that I want to share with you, and there's various ways to do this, but some sort of like sticky note chart or sticky wall. But it's the use of, and you can use postcards too. This example that it shows in the picture is sticky notes, where people throw all of their ideas, and I usually say one single idea per sticky note or postcard. And you can throw them all up together on a flip chart or a wall. It gives you the opportunity and everyone the opportunity to look at all the ideas. It allows you to sort them and move them around and group them together. And it's a fun way to just capture a lot of ideas all at the same time. It allows everyone to equally participate and not have their name attached to any one of those ideas too, because sometimes that's the stigma too. Like, I don't want to share an idea because, you know, someone might not like it or think badly of me or whatever that might be. So this is a fun one that I use quite often. It works good for both adults and youth to use this sort of facilitation tool to generate ideas and brainstorm different topics. The next tool, this one, sometimes I feel like I overuse it because I use it so often, but it's the use of rotating flip charts. And you can do this lots of different ways. I usually put like 3 or 4 topics around the room and then just have groups rotate around them and discuss whatever topic or whatever idea that we're trying to capture thoughts on at a time. And so this is also a real life example here on the right of a class I did 2 weeks ago. And I broke them into groups. We had 3 kind of similar but different topics. And I had them rotate and they shared all their ideas. And then at the end, we kind of discussed it all as a big group. So a great way for small groups to discuss. They all got to share their ideas. And then we discussed it as a large group. So it was a great way to share thoughts and ideas. So those are a couple of my favorite facilitation tools when it comes to ideas and brainstorming, but there are certainly some others out there. So decision-making tools, that's kind of the next category. However, I'm not going to talk about this today, and I'm going to put a plug for Dan Clark's presentation next week. He's going to talk about decision-making tools, and Dan is fabulous. And so I hope that you join us next week for that. And so the next topic is keeping the meeting on track. So even if you spend hours planning a meeting and you put all these facilitation tools in place, sometimes it takes one person or one opportunity to just go off track and the whole meeting is derailed. So I wanted to share some tools for you to help keep your meetings on track a little bit better. And I do see there's a question on the sticky note. I'll maybe get to that one at the end, if that's okay, Doris. So one of the facilitation tools is the use of a parking lot. Which I do see done fairly often, but maybe not always done well. So if you're going to have a parking lot, make sure you use it. So the parking lot is usually on the wall, an opportunity to put those thoughts and ideas that are going to require maybe either a follow-up or an additional meeting or additional research, but don't want to be forgotten. And I like this example here because it kind of breaks it down into the follow-up and the ideas. And it kind of makes it clear on, you know, which route we need to go here. And what's important too, if you utilize the parking lot, is make sure that you do circle back to it in the future. So if there's ideas that are brought up, make sure that they're addressed at some point in time. Otherwise, people get frustrated of always putting something on the parking lot and never taking it off the parking lot. And it may not be at that meeting, but maybe it's an opportunity in the future. Next tool, and this is maybe not technically a facilitation tool, but I find it helpful, and that's the use of a timekeeper. A timekeeper can be used in several different ways. One, just maybe tracking the meeting in its entirety and looking at the agenda to make sure that we're staying on time and on track. Also making everyone aware that the meeting might come to an end and we haven't maybe talked about some issues. If you are in a meeting where people are given only a certain amount of time to make comments or discussion on a particular issue, the timekeeper can be used that way. And it is a helpful tool. And I know sometimes it's easy if you're facilitating the meeting to kind of get lost in that discussion and lost in the process. But having someone who can just kind of gently remind you or remind the group at certain points of time where you're at can be very helpful. And it doesn't have to be done in a mean or intrusive way, just a gentle reminder. The next tool I'll share, one that I do very often, is hard stops on meetings. And I know this might seem silly, but I have found that it creates a lot of respect when it comes to having and hosting meetings, is putting a hard stop on meetings. And so I try to be very intentional and very meaningful. If I say a meeting will take an hour or an hour and a half or whatever it's going to be, then I stick to that. Because it creates respect for the meeting participants and makes that clear that there is kind of an end in sight. You're not there forever. And if you don't get through all the content of that meeting, make sure that people are aware that that's okay. And so you create that environment where people can do and share and be part of the meeting. But there's also a sunset and an opportunity again, if needed, to pick up on that topic. I have found in my experience that people would rather give, an hour of their time, maybe once a month, than have like a 4 to 5 hour marathon one time. It's just very exhausting, and then people get emotional. So hard stops on meetings can also be very helpful as well. These are just a few of the facilitation tools out there. There are lots more. And just your final kind of thought in the chat there, what's your favorite facilitation tool? What do you use that works well for you, that you like? It could be something that I shared today or something that else that is out there. But would love to hear that. And then I said we have a question, is how do you do sticky note online? And Doris, I'll be very honest, I have not done a lot of like virtual facilitation of meetings, at least not in that regards. But it looks like Christine offers one resource is Jamboard, which I have heard of, but I have not had any experience with. But it's through Google, so that might be something to check out. If anyone has had experience with like a virtual sticky wall or sticky notes or some sort of facilitation, please share that, because that's a really great question, and I would love to know that as well. A couple of people have used Jamboard, so that's really cool. I'll have to check that out myself. It's like Colleen has used the rotating boards or the rotating flip charts. Yeah, I use that one all the time. Sometimes I feel like I overdo it, but it is so easy and it's a great facilitation tool.
Yeah, I would just add in, great question, Doris. And I see folks are crowdsourcing here. The online virtual kind of brainstorming tools have expanded greatly, obviously, in the last 3 years. So it's almost kind of endless options. A lot of them have free. So you can go in and kind of play with them and try them out. And there's lots of reviews out there as well if you just kind of Google it. But it kind of comes down to preference, like which ones fit you the best and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, totally. Padlet looks like another one, Zoom or WebEx. And I know I'm more familiar with WebEx. I do know that WebEx does have some interaction type tools that I used during COVID, but it's been a while since I've played around with those. I'm fortunate that I get to do a lot of my meetings or most of my meetings in person anymore. So, and thank you, Katie, for posting the link again for the recordings.
Yeah, we have 10 minutes. Any other questions about facilitation for Allison or other tools you use that you'd like to share with the group? Allison, I'd love to ask you a question. We talk about this, I know, a lot in extension, different personality types, and you showed a lot of tools that are really helpful for maybe managing people who take a lot of time or are disruptive. What do you do when the tools you've put into place proactively don't work.
Mhm. Yeah, it's hard. And sometimes you put all this time and effort into a meeting and you think you have everything in place to try to like kind of circumvent some of those issues that you might see on the horizon. And sometimes still things don't go as planned. Um, but I think utilizing the small group discussions, kind of trying to avoid some of the large group dynamics can sometimes help those people that maybe are a little bit disruptive. It still gives them the opportunity to voice, but maybe it doesn't take away from what you're trying to do. The use of the parking lot can also be helpful because sometimes some of those people, they're very passionate about the topic or the situation and have lots of thoughts and ideas. So just really try to use that and stick to this is the parking lot. Let's try to focus our discussion on whatever the topic is for the day. The use of a timekeeper. So you can use some of these tools for some of those folks, and it can be hard for sure.
I like how you mentioned using some of the tools in concert together. That makes a lot of sense, how you kind of built the supportive environment around the facilitation of the meeting. That's super smart. Jeff has a great question here too. How do you gracefully silence the side chattering people?
Mhm. So I've done a few different things. So I think one way, and you can do this, I think you can do this gracefully, where if you see some side chatter, just maybe ask them very politely, if they have something to share with the group, and you don't have to necessarily call them out, but just say, is there anything that you would like to share, or is there something we can add to the parking lot? Um, and just kind of trying to redirect that conversation. I also think, again, some of these facilitation tools are helpful to kind of minimize that because you break up the monotony of just kind of a standard meeting. Another thing that I do, and I can't do this necessarily with all of my meetings, but one group in particular I work with, they have like these like nameplates they use for the class, and I do assigned seating. And so I'm pretty strategic about not putting the people together that I know might tend to do that more than others. And I know that you can't do that with everything, but even my 4-H leaders, sometimes I'll be strategic about how I group them together if I'm doing a training, and mix it up a little bit to try to minimize that. It's again, that may not work for everything and every time, but trying to just, yeah, move things around, mix things up. It kind of keeps them more focused, I have found.
Yeah. I'd love to just add to that if I can. I think it's easy to jump to the conclusion that the side chatter is not productive or helpful or positive. And I love what you just shared there, Allison, is like that conversation could be really valuable. So, in the spirit of being graceful with these side conversations, I think making the pause to say, hey, I know really good ideas are being discussed, however you might say it. I want to make sure we have space and time for everyone to be heard and um, do it in a way that's like, we want to know what you're talking about because we're not making the assumption that you're just kind of, like snipping at each other or the idea of that maybe the idea sparked something really, really interesting and some personality types can't wait to share it, right? They have to start telling it to someone. So it's
Mhm.
not always bad behavior. And I think that's like really important in being graceful as a facilitator is giving some room for people to be a little messy.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And I think you're right on that. It's not the chatter, even though it can be disruptive, sometimes it's not necessarily a bad thing. It could just because they're really passionate about something, and they have those ideas. So that wheel is turning and they're like, ooh, and they need that just to let that out. Someone else in the chat also suggested, and this I think is a good idea too. If it is like a chronic problem, consider maybe adding that to your ground rules, your group norms. Put that in your working agreement and then just use that as an opportunity to kind of remind people of that the group norms that they've agreed to. And then someone else also suggested, if it is also a chronic problem, maybe moving them to the side or taking an opportunity after the meeting to visit with them. I think if that can be helpful too, to understand what it was that they, wanted to visit about. So yeah, there's a lot of good thoughts and ideas about facilitation tools in the chat box. I was trying to keep up. Um, there's lots of good stuff. A hard
Great.
start time was another facilitation tool someone put, and I'm all about that too. I'm the meeting starts at 6. If I'm facilitating, we start at 6, and it sets that expectation. People will learn that you are one that starts meetings on time, and you'll have less people trickling in late. If you set that expectation as we are starting on time, I'm not giving you a 5-minute window to come late. It does make a difference.
Allison, with that hard start time, what would you do if your group has some people who are very social and like to connect and maybe don't gather regularly, so they want to catch up prior to the meeting? What might you do in that situation?
Yes, immediately I thought of one group I worked with who is like, they don't get out very often. And so whenever we have our committee meeting, it's also social time. Drives me crazy because, as I said earlier, I'm like a professional meeting goer. So it's like I want to do business and then get home to my family or get back to whatever I was doing. And so a couple things crossed my mind. I still tend to like to start on time, and then I just let them hang out afterwards and do their visiting. And I just very nicely and graciously say, thank you, everyone. You're welcome to just sit back and visit. I'm gonna, do what I need to do and just, say thank you and goodbye. The other thing that you can do if you know that is going to happen and they want that pre-social opportunity is schedule it. So give them 15 minutes or half an hour and say, come at 6 o'clock if you want to visit and socialize. We'll have snacks or whatever. And then at 6:30, we're going to start the meeting. And just be really strategic about that on your meeting is like, here's what we're going to do at this time. We'll start this, afterwards, and then just try to keep that meeting on track. It can be hard because those are also like the side chatter people too that are always like, they get sidetracked really easy. Just thinking about this one committee, they like to get together and don't do it enough. But and even you could even schedule like a social like opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm doing that for another program that I work with. Is we're going to do we have a class that's most of the day, and then I have an optional social at a brewery at the end of the day. And so for those people that need that,
Nice.
they can come and they can get that out of their system a little bit.
Great. Thanks. Those are great ideas. We'll do one more quick question. Chris had a question about, could you hand sticky notes to the side chatters and ask them to write their ideas? Is this a good non-confrontational way to address that?
Yeah, and I think what I would suggest for people to do, like, is just have sticky notes on the table and tell people, if you have thoughts, write that on your sticky note, either keep that in front of you or you can have them place it on the parking lot. But give them the opportunity to, make sure, like, we don't want to forget. It sounds like you have something important. We don't want to forget that. So put that on your sticky note so we can come back to it later. So I think that could be a good use for it. And that's why it's nice sometimes when you have tools in front of the people to use as well. It's not always just for the facilitators, for the people too, to be able to utilize those, put all those ideas and thoughts down in a constructive way.
Great. Well, it is 9 o'clock. Thank you all for joining us here today. Allison, thank you for sharing your expertise and wisdom on this topic. We know it's not always straightforward. So lots of really good ideas shared here. This will be up in a day or two on our YouTube channel. And then join us next Tuesday. We'll have Dan Clark joining us to do a deeper dive into decision-making tools in meetings and group processes. So have a lovely day, and we hope to see you again next week. Thanks.